In the third year of marriage, while her husband was taking a shower, Nancy accidentally saw the messages on his phone. Benjamin, since leaving you, I've been miserable, missing you every day. Tomorrow I'm getting married, and my only wish is to see you one last time before the wedding, to give you my first night. I'll wait for half an hour. If you don't come, I'll kill myself. The moment she saw these two messages, Nancy felt as if struck by lightning. Stunned for a long time without recovering, until Benjamin came out, took one look at his phone, and immediately turned to leave. Watching his hurried departing figure, Nancy's heart gave a violent tremble, and she couldn't help but call out to stop him. Benjamin, I've heard that after men return to their families, between their wives and their lovers, they always feel most guilty toward the lover. Is that true? Hearing her trembling voice, Benjamin suddenly halted his steps. He frowned slightly, his tone laced with impatience and weariness. Nancy, I've already returned to the family. What more do you want from me? His icy tone struck Nancy heavily in the heart, instantly making her burst into tears. She really wanted to ask him. He may have returned to the family physically, but what about his heart? Isn't it still with Melissa? But he didn't even give her a chance to speak before he slammed the door and left. Nancy closed her eyes, tears silently streaming down. She and Benjamin had grown up together since childhood, a match made in heaven in everyone's eyes. He would ride his bike across half the city to buy her a cake just because she casually mentioned craving one from the west side. He would stay up all night studying with her when she failed an exam. Even when she had period cramps, he would anxiously sweat buckets, clumsily brewing her brown sugar water. Everyone said Nancy was the princess Benjamin cherished in the palm of his hand. So when they got engaged with the blessings of both sets of parents, no one was surprised, until the junior named Melissa appeared. Nancy first saw Melissa at Benjamin's graduation ceremony. The girl with a ponytail stood beside Benjamin, the two chatting and laughing. Melissa even playfully tugged at his sleeve, and Benjamin didn't even pull away. At that moment, Nancy felt a sudden pang in her heart. Later, she began to frequently hear the name Melissa from Benjamin's mouth. Melissa helped me find that out-of-print book in the library today. Melissa actually likes Interstellar too. We talked all night. Melissa said she wants to watch the sunrise, and I promised to go with her this weekend. Nancy watched Benjamin as his eyes lit up while talking about Melissa, feeling as if an invisible hand had tightly gripped her heart. That look in his eyes, she knew it all too well. It was just like how he used to look at her. Later, when she saw that his pinned post was about her, the chat history was with her, and every detail of his life was shared with her, Nancy completely lost it. She had to admit that the Benjamin who once said he would only love her forever had emotionally cheated. Although he hadn't taken any actual inappropriate actions, he couldn't help but develop feelings for Melissa. She was heartbroken, unable to accept this reality, yet couldn't let go of Benjamin, so she forced him to make a choice. Either break off the engagement with her, or cut all ties with Melissa completely. After much struggle, Benjamin ultimately chose to end things with Melissa. The wedding proceeded as scheduled, but Nancy could clearly sense that after marriage, he seemed to have lost his soul, with no trace of his former self left. When they were on dates, he would suddenly stare blankly at a certain spot or a certain figure, lost in thought for a long time without saying a word. From time to time, he would lock himself in the study, drinking himself into a stupor until his consciousness grew hazy. On anniversaries and Valentine's Day, he no longer prepared surprises in advance as he used to, always brushing it off with just a bouquet of flowers or a gift. Nancy thought it was because she wasn't good enough, believing that if she gave him enough time and emotional support, he would gradually return to his old self. But it wasn't until today that she realized. No matter how much she gave or how long she waited, Benjamin would never come back. All these years, what she desperately tried to warm was nothing but a walking corpse. His soul, his affection, all his passion had long been left with Melissa, no longer devoted to her alone. Their marriage existed in name only, and she had lost all hope to carry on. Nancy stayed awake all night, only snapping back to reality at daybreak, just as she picked up her phone to look up divorce procedures. She stumbled upon a video of Benjamin crashing a wedding. In the frame, Benjamin, wearing a crisp suit, rushed into the wedding venue and, in front of everyone, took Melissa's hand. The footage was blurry, but she could still make out the long-lost look of triumph on his face. Just like the way the boy had raised his eyebrows and confessed to her on the high school playground back then, Nancy's fingers trembled uncontrollably as she replayed the 10-second video 7 times. When she refreshed the page for the 8th time, the video had vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed, but those images had already been seared into her retinas like a branding iron. Benjamin, the hem of his coat fluttering as he ran, Melissa, her expression of pleasant surprise, and that tiny mole on the back of his hand, so familiar to her when their fingers were tightly interlocked. It felt as if a bloody hole had been torn open in her chest, with cold wind howling through it. She wiped away her tears and, without any further hesitation, gathered all her documents and prepared to file for divorce. But as soon as she arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, the staff delivered another shocking and devastating piece of news to her. Ms. Nancy, your marriage certificate with this Benjamin is forged and holds no legal effect. Nancy's mind went blank, almost unable to believe what she had just heard, but immediately, she recalled that 3 years ago. When they went to register their marriage, it happened to be May 20th, 520, and the queue was extremely long. It was Benjamin who said he didn't want her to endure the long wait, so he went alone to handle the marriage certificate. Now, she felt both naive and ridiculous. She actually believed it, believed that he could overcome that hurdle, believed that he could completely forget Melissa and choose to marry her. Heart-wrenching pain surged over her like a tide, almost completely drowning her. She bit her lip until it bled, with only one thought left in her mind. For her at this moment, a fake divorce certificate was, in a way, a form of liberation. She left the Civil Affairs Bureau with a pale face. Just as she was about to hail a taxi, her vision went black and she fainted on the ground. In a daze, she opened her eyes and saw the nurse holding her medical record, frowning tightly. "Call your husband, have him come here right now." Seeing the nurse's serious expression, Nancy instinctively thought she had a serious illness, and her mind went blank. She picked up her phone, found Benjamin's number, and called 6 or 7 times, but he didn't answer a single one. Just as her patience was about to run out, his cold tone finally reached her ears. "Stop calling, I'm in a meeting." From the moment he picked up to when he hung up, it only took 3 seconds, but Nancy clearly heard Melissa's voice cooing his name. She clenched her hands so tightly that her palms were bruised and bloody. After a long moment, urged on by the nurse, she finally revealed a self-mocking smile. "I don't have a husband. If there's something wrong with my body, just tell me directly." The nurse looked surprised and handed over the test results. "You don't have a husband, how is that possible? You're already 3 months pregnant, the organs and body of the baby in your womb have already developed, but due to your earlier neglect, you're now somewhat malnourished. You should quickly call the baby's father." Upon hearing the news of her pregnancy, Nancy was stunned, her mind going completely blank. She lowered her head and looked at her still flat abdomen, feeling a complex mix of emotions all at once. But soon, she completely calmed down and made her decision. "No need. Please arrange an abortion for me. I don't want this child." An hour later, Nancy lay on the cold operating table, memories slowly surfacing in her mind. Back when she just had menstrual cramps, Benjamin would stay by her bedside, massaging her stomach, brewing brown sugar water, and coaxing her to sleep. He knew she loved beauty and adored all kinds of little dresses, so he hired many designers to create beautiful clothes just for her. She said she wanted a wedding of the century. And he started preparing from the age of 18, listing thousands of her preferences and taboos. The man who once made her heart flutter countless times would, from this day forward, become a thing of the past. After the surgery, Nancy, dragging her weak body, found a nurse and asked them to preserve the embryo of the baby. On the day she left, she would give it to Benjamin as a farewell gift. After being discharged from the hospital, Nancy immediately went to complete the procedures to cancel her immigration registration. After the staff submitted the application, they told her that the approval would likely come through in about 15 business days. After returning home, Nancy rested for 2 days, then gathered everything related to Benjamin, photos taken together during their travels to far-off places, gifts he gave her that filled the storage room, matching couple mugs, pajamas. She didn't keep a single item. Burning everything to ashes, Benjamin happened to return and saw the ashes scattered on the ground, looking over with a puzzled expression. "What did you burn?" "Nothing, just some useless clutter." Benjamin didn't pay it much mind and handed her the gift he was holding, his tone noticeably gentler than it had been in the past few days. "Are you sick? Why do you look so pale and have lost so much weight?" Faced with his sudden concern, Nancy was stunned for a moment and did not respond. "I'm fine." Her unusually cold tone made Benjamin realize that something was wrong. Remembering that the scene when he left last time was not very pleasant, he then explained a few words. "The company had some issues a couple of days ago, and I was in a hurry to deal with them, so I spoke a bit hastily." "Weren't you always saying you wanted this bag? I had my assistant buy it for you. Don't be upset, okay?" Nancy glanced at it and remembered that when this bag first came out, she had indeed playfully told him she liked it, but he hadn't taken it to heart, so she contacted the sales associate herself and bought the latest model. Now, 2 months later, she had already grown tired of carrying it, and he was giving it to her as a gift. "It's been so long, why think of giving it now?" Benjamin thought she would be very happy, but didn't expect her reaction to be so calm. "You like it, of course I had to buy it for you. Didn't I often buy you things before?" as he spoke. He remembered that it had been a long time since he last bought Nancy a gift. He had no recollection at all of when the last time was or what he had given her. Realizing this, Benjamin was also stunned, a complex expression appearing on his face. Nancy quietly watched the flicker of guilt in his eyes and said nothing. She turned and went back to her room, only to see an unfamiliar friend request pop up on her phone. Seeing that familiar profile picture, her eyes darkened slightly. She accepted the request, and the other person immediately sent over an address. "Got time? Let's meet up. I have a lot of things in my possession that I think you'll be very interested in." It was Melissa. Nancy knew exactly why she had sent this message and wanted to see her in person before making a clean break. She genuinely wanted to know what it was about Melissa that made Benjamin unable to forget her, so she changed her clothes and went to the appointment. As soon as she arrived at the cafe, the other person got straight to the point and handed over many photos. Most of them were Benjamin's on-the-scene shots of the wedding disruption, while the other part consisted of photos of the two of them dating and shopping together over the past couple of days. Melissa thought she would be both shocked and pained upon seeing these things, but when she lifted her head triumphantly, what she saw was Nancy's calm, unruffled expression. She couldn't hold back her impatience and couldn't resist starting to boast. 3 years have passed, and Benjamin still hasn't let go of me. Nancy, even if you have his body, so what? His heart will always remain with me. With just one word from me, he rushed into my wedding without hesitation to object, bought me a villa, promised to come see me every week, and even left his personal assistant with me to take care of my daily life. For men, the one they can't have is always the best. So you can never win against me. Is the one you can't have always the best? Perhaps not. After all, Benjamin had already proven it to her. She released her cramped fingers, her voice hoarse as she retorted, "So what, if you were truly the only one in his heart? Then why did he give up on you 3 years ago and marry me instead?" Melissa was left speechless by this remark, and it took her a while to come up with a rebuttal. "I admit. Back then our relationship couldn't compare to your childhood bond, but from the day you forced him to cut ties with me, you lost completely." After hearing Melissa's words, Nancy understood why she and Benjamin had ended up where they were today. That's right, from the moment she forced Benjamin to make a choice. She had transformed from a pure, bright moonlight into a grain of rice stuck on a collar, while Melissa had become the cinnabar mole at his heart that could never be erased. She took a deep breath, suppressing the surging emotions in her heart, and forced out a smile. "Yes, you're right, I lost. But Melissa, remember, as the third party who intruded into someone else's family, you won't win either." With that said, Nancy stood up, paid the bill, and prepared to leave. Melissa didn't understand the meaning behind her words, only feeling that she was being provoked. Furious, she chased after her and grabbed Nancy's wrist. "So you're clinging on desperately because you think Benjamin will come back to you? Don't be delusional. I can prove to you right now who matters most in his heart." Melissa had barely finished speaking when Nancy felt a chill run down her spine. Before she could react, her wrist was Melissa violently grabbed, and she was dragged into the middle of the road. A screeching brake sound suddenly pierced the air. Nancy looked up in terror and saw an out-of-control sports car speeding toward them. Time seemed to stretch infinitely in that moment. Nancy clearly saw Benjamin sprinting from across the street, his pupils constricted, his face filled with unprecedented panic. "Melissa," at the critical moment, Benjamin didn't hesitate to reach out and pull Melissa back to safety. "Nancy," bang. With a dull thud, her body was sent flying like a kite with its string cut, landing heavily in a pool of blood more than 10 meters away. Excruciating pain instantly swept through her entire body. Nancy felt as if her internal organs had been knocked out of place. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Her vision began to blur, but she still forced herself to lift her head. Not far away, Benjamin was holding the terrified Melissa tightly, gently patting her back. "It's all right, it's all right. I'm here." In the last moment before darkness swallowed her consciousness, Nancy vaguely remembered that year when she was 18, running a high fever of 39 degrees. Benjamin had held her just like this, staying by her bedside all night without sleep. How did it all change when she woke up again? Nancy found herself in the hospital. She struggled to open her eyes and saw Benjamin sitting by the hospital bed. Seeing her awake, his tightly furrowed brows relaxed slightly, but were soon covered again with a layer of frost. "What were you trying to do by looking for Melissa?" His voice was as cold as ice. "I've already kept my distance from her as you wished. Why did you have to go and disturb her life?" Nancy's pupils sharply contracted. She never expected that after narrowly escaping death and waking up, Benjamin's first words wouldn't be concern, but an interrogation. Her throat felt as if scraped by sandpaper as she strained to voice the words. "Is what you call keeping your distance, crashing her wedding to object?" Benjamin's body visibly stiffened, his gaze turning icy cold. "You've been investigating me. Melissa's parents are forcing her to marry a man 10 years older than her. I've already failed her once. I can't just stand by and watch her jump into a pit of fire." His voice grew louder, until he was almost growling. "If you're going to nitpick over something like this, do you have no empathy at all?" Nancy clutched the bedsheet tightly, her nails digging deep into her palms, so in his eyes, her questioning was petty nitpicking, and her pain was a lack of empathy. "Since you care about her so much," Nancy's voice was hoarse beyond recognition, "why didn't you say?" This sentence seemed to ignite Benjamin's long-suppressed anger. "What would it change if I said it?" He suddenly leaned forward, planting his hands on either side of the hospital bed, trapping her in that small space. "Wasn't it you who forced me to make a choice back then? Nancy, we've been together for so many years. I've given you everything you wanted, never failed you." His eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling. "I just needed some space, just got lost briefly, but soon got back on track. But you kept pushing, obsessing over Melissa. Are you trying to drive me crazy?" Nancy's tears finally overflowed. She desperately wanted to ask him if he had forgotten. At 4 years old, it was him who held a lollipop and said he wanted her to be his wife. At 14, it was him who declared in front of the whole school that she was his, ordering all boys to stay away. At 18, it was him who confessed under a sky full of fireworks, saying, "Nancy, I like you." But now, it had become her who drove him crazy. She bit her lip until it bled, her chest heaving violently, stubbornly refusing to let out even a single sob. Benjamin, the raging fire in his heart was extinguished by the look in her eyes. He released his tightly clenched hands, rubbed his temples, and averted his gaze from her. "I know you feel insecure, but I have my limits and I'll maintain proper boundaries. Since I've returned to our family, I'll only treat her as an ordinary friend from now on, and won't do anything inappropriate. Can you trust me just this once?" Nancy knew that when he spoke in this tone, it meant his patience had reached its limit. Continuing to argue would be futile, only further intensifying the conflict and making her feel worse. So she didn't want to torment herself any longer and wearily closed her eyes. The atmosphere in the hospital room gradually returned to calm. Benjamin thought she had taken his words to heart and told her about the surprise he had prepared. "You've always said you wanted to see the aurora, right? I've already made travel plans. For our 3rd wedding anniversary, I'll take you to Antarctica. Just tell me what gift you want, and I'll buy it for you." Nancy laughed, her heart aching with each chuckle. Their marriage was a sham, so how could there be any wedding anniversary to speak of? Just as she was about to speak, Benjamin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, immediately stood up, and left after uttering a single sentence. "You rest well, I'm going back to the company for a meeting. If anything comes up, just call me and I'll come right away." Nancy caught sight of Melissa's name and knew he had lied to her again. But to her at this moment, none of that mattered anymore. After all, in just a few more days, she would be gone. From then on, Benjamin, whatever he did or whoever he liked, had nothing to do with her anymore. After resting in the hospital for a few days, Nancy was discharged alone. The doctor said she showed signs of depression and advised her to go out and relax more. Since the weather was warm, she went out for a walk. While wandering alone to the south of the city, she felt a bit tired and walked into a quiet bar. As soon as she sat down, she saw 2 familiar figures outside the window. It's Benjamin and Melissa. The 2 of them strolled through the crowd. Melissa had cream smeared on her face, and he would take out a handkerchief to gently wipe it off for her. He would also crouch down to tie her loose shoelaces. Nancy watched silently, remembering how during their passionate love affair, Benjamin had taken care of her with the same meticulous attention. Times had changed, and hearts were fickle. It was time for her to let herself go. Nancy withdrew her gaze and was about to close the curtains when Melissa pulled Benjamin into the same quiet bar, choosing the booth next to hers. The soundproofing between the booths was poor, and their conversation could be clearly heard. "Benjamin, after I ran away from the wedding, my parents were furious. They're forcing me to continue with arranged meetings, threatening to cut ties with me if I refuse. What should I do? I don't want to be with any other man. I just want to stay by your side, even if it means having no official status." After a moment of silence from the next booth, Benjamin's deep voice came through. "Tell your parents that I will marry you." Upon hearing his words, Melissa was instantly stunned, her tone filled with disbelief. "Marry? But didn't you already marry Nancy? I only had a wedding ceremony with her. We never officially registered the marriage. In a few days, under the pretense of celebrating our wedding anniversary, I will send her abroad on a trip to get her out of the way, and then take you to register our marriage." Nancy's fingertips dug sharply into her palms. "So that's how it is. That meticulously planned anniversary surprise was merely a pretext to get her out of the way." In an instant, Nancy's heart felt as though it had been pierced by a sharp blade. Bleeding profusely, she forced a pale, strained smile at the corners of her lips. The next room started discussing the details of getting their marriage certificate. Nancy couldn't bear to listen any longer. She grabbed her handbag and rushed into the restroom as if fleeing. The woman in the mirror had a deathly pale face and red-rimmed eyes. She turned on the faucet, letting the icy water flow over her trembling fingers, but it couldn't wash away the surging pain in her heart. After what felt like an eternity, the piercing sound of a fire alarm suddenly blared throughout the entire bar. Fire! Run! Amid the panicked screams, Nancy pushed open the door, and thick smoke immediately rushed toward her. She covered her mouth and nose, squeezing through the crowd toward the emergency exit. At that moment, she saw Benjamin rushing out against the flow of people. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his face showing a panic she had never seen before. Melissa, where are you? A passerby grabbed him tightly. Don't go in, it's all fire inside. Benjamin broke free as if gone mad and rushed into the fire without hesitation. His retreating figure was resolute and determined. As if he would bring Melissa out even if it meant crossing mountains of blades and seas of fire. Nancy stood frozen in place, suddenly reminded of the landslide when she was 16. Back then, she was buried under the rubble, barely clinging to life. It was Benjamin who dug with his bare hands all night long, refusing to stop even when his fingers were torn and bloody, forcibly snatching her back from the clutches of death. From that moment on, she was convinced that this young man, who would risk his life for her, would be her lifelong support. But now, she watched with her own eyes as Benjamin rushed into the sea of flames for another woman, throwing caution to the wind once again. It turned out his love had never changed, it's just that the person is no longer her. Nancy was pushed to the safety zone by the surging crowd. In the distance, the sirens of fire trucks were getting closer. She stared at the building engulfed in flames, her heart feeling as if it were being tightly squeezed by an invisible hand. After an unknown amount of time, a staggering figure suddenly rushed out from the fire scene. Benjamin, covered in wounds, was holding Melissa and dashed out at the last moment. He was covered in blood, yet he protected Melissa completely unharmed. As soon as he stepped out of the fire, his strength gave out and he knelt to the ground, but he still held the person in his arms tightly, refusing to let go. The paramedics quickly lifted them onto stretchers. Nancy stood in place, watching the ambulance speed away, then turned and melted into the night. After returning, she blocked all messages and calls, and didn't visit Benjamin in the hospital. Instead, she focused on packing her belongings. After finishing packing, she booked a flight departing in 5 days. The airline called to confirm her itinerary, and she answered each question one by one. Yes, my flight is scheduled in 5 days. Before she could finish speaking, the door was suddenly pushed open. Benjamin stood at the doorway, a bandage still wrapped around his forehead, his face terrifyingly dark. Where are you going in 5 days? Nancy's fingers trembled slightly, not expecting Benjamin to return so suddenly. Suppressing the surging emotions in her heart, she replied nonchalantly, "Didn't you say you were taking me to see the Northern Lights?" The airline called to confirm the itinerary. Benjamin froze for a moment, as if only just remembering the matter. His forehead was still wrapped in bandages, his face slightly pale, yet it couldn't conceal the handsome features between his brows. "A few days ago I was injured and hospitalized." He stared into Nancy's eyes. "Why didn't you reply to my messages or answer my calls?" Nancy lowered her eyelashes, her voice unnervingly calm. "I lost my phone, still waiting for the SM card to be reissued." After speaking, she turned to go back to her room. Seeing her indifferent attitude, Benjamin frowned slightly and couldn't help calling out to stop her. "Don't you have anything else to ask me? Aren't you going to ask where I got hurt, how my condition is?" Nancy's footsteps halted. Of course she knew Benjamin's expectations. He was hoping she would anxiously inquire about his injuries, tenderly apply medicine for him, and take meticulous care of him, just like before, just like when he had a stomachache. She braved the heavy snow to bring him medicine, just like when he was drunk. She stayed up all night brewing sobering soup, just like when he lost a loved one. She stayed by his side without leaving for a moment. But she wasn't a fool. She had loved him purely before, because he had also given her a pure and sincere love. Now that he had someone else in his heart and his love was tainted with impurities, it was better for them to go their separate ways. "Didn't you always say I was too controlling?" Nancy turned around, a faint smile on her lips. "I've thought it through. From now on, I'll give you enough space. I won't pry into things you don't want to talk about, and I won't force you to do things you don't want to do." Benjamin's pupils suddenly contracted, as if he had been struck hard on the head. He opened his mouth, only to find he had nothing to say, because these were the very words he had once spoken to Nancy himself. The atmosphere fell into a deathly silence. In the end, Benjamin found himself inexplicably following her into the bedroom. He stood at the door, watching Nancy's back as she packed her luggage, and suddenly felt a suffocating tightness in his chest. 2 months ago was your birthday. He awkwardly changed the subject. I was on a business trip and didn't have time to celebrate with you. The auction house just received a new batch of jewelry, all in styles you like. Let me take you to pick some out, as a belated birthday gift. Nancy didn't even look up. No need. Benjamin, however, refused to comply and insisted on pulling her out the door. When she arrived at the auction venue and saw the jewelry she used to like, Nancy still couldn't muster any interest and felt rather indifferent. Benjamin knew she was in a bad mood, so without asking, he directly bought out the entire auction. 30 million, 50 million, 80 million. He raised his bidding paddle again and again, nearly sweeping all the most expensive jewelry in the room. Each time he won a bid, he would turn to look at Nancy, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of delight on her face. However, Nancy always maintained a calm expression. The surrounding whispers kept reaching her ears. That must be the Brandon family group's Mr. Benjamin and his wife, right? They're indeed as loving as the rumors say. I heard that before marriage, Mr. Benjamin had a close female friend, which almost caused them to break up. Men, who hasn't had their wild and reckless youth. In the end, they all come back to family. These comments pierced Nancy's heart like knives. She looked at the high-spirited Benjamin beside her and suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of irony. In the eyes of the world, they were the epitome of a loving couple. But only she knew that this marriage was a lie from the very beginning. Benjamin had never let go of Melissa. The two of them had never truly overcome that hurdle. A change of heart is just that, a change of heart. There's no such thing as settling down and returning to the family. After the auction ended, Benjamin got up to answer a phone call. The staff delivered the exquisitely packaged jewelry box to Nancy. Its substantial weight made her wrist ache as she carried these priceless pieces outside, only to hear a familiar argument at the corner. Through the half-open private room door, she saw Melissa, her eyes red, shaking off Benjamin's hand. You lied to me about working overtime. But you were actually accompanying Nancy to the auction. Melissa's voice trembled with tears. If I hadn't come to pick out wedding rings, I wouldn't have known you were doing this behind my back. Benjamin sighed, his slender fingers gently wiping away the tears on her face. I do have to work overtime. I'll be heading back to the office soon. I only brought her here to make up for a birthday gift. Don't be angry. Nancy stood in the shadows, watching Melissa's expression gradually soften. Then why didn't you tell me in advance? Melissa tugged gently at his sleeve. When I saw you had bought the engagement ring I had my eye on, I was so angry I felt dizzy. It's my fault. Benjamin affectionately ruffled her hair. I'll give you the ring in a moment, and that sapphire necklace. Okay, I also like that pair of jade bracelets. All for you. Nancy looked down at the heavy gift bag in her hand, a sarcastic smile curling at the corner of her lips. Melissa, when she throws a tantrum over trivial matters, he can understand, tolerate, and take the initiative to apologize. But when she asks a single question, it suddenly becomes unreasonable nagging. Melissa, if she says she likes something, he'll give it to her without hesitation, even if it's a belated birthday gift he promised to make up for. What does it mean to pressure too much and leave no personal space? It's simply because he no longer loves her, so no matter what she does, he won't show any more understanding. Nancy didn't listen further, turning silently to go downstairs. Just as she reached the roadside and was about to hail a taxi, Benjamin caught up and called out to her, Nancy. There's an emergency at the company. Can you get back by yourself? Nancy nodded, then his gaze fell on the bag in her hand as he carefully began to speak. I just ran into 2 business partners and chatted for a bit. Their wives mentioned they really liked some of the jewelry I photographed today. Since you didn't seem particularly fond of any of them, I agreed to give the pieces to them. Next time there's something you like, I'll bring you back to pick out something new. Nancy didn't expose his lie and simply handed the bag over. No need, there won't be a next time. Benjamin paused for a moment. What did you say? Nancy shook her head and said it was nothing, telling him to go attend to his work. Watching his figure fade into the distance, she answered him in her heart. They would soon go their separate ways. There would be no next time, and no future either. After returning, Nancy developed a fever and stayed in bed at home for several days. She drifted in and out of restless dreams, where 16-year-old Benjamin stayed by her side, coaxing her gently to take medicine, constantly checking her temperature, wiping the sweat from her brow. But when she woke, she found herself alone, with only an empty water glass and scattered pills on the floor. Her throat was parched and burning, dragging her weakened body downstairs for water. Her vision went black and she tumbled down the stairs. She was covered in injuries from the fall. With a terrifying gash on her forehead, the relentless flow of blood drenched her, turning her into a bloody mess. She lay in a pool of blood, feeling as if her entire body was about to fall apart, yet she didn't even have the strength to move a finger. The nanny, who had come running at the sound, was terrified by the scene and immediately called 120 to take her to the hospital. In the ambulance, the nanny kept dialing Benjamin's phone. "Sorry. The number you dialed cannot be answered at the moment," a robotic female voice repeated 37 times. Nancy weakly pressed the nanny's hand. "Don't call anymore, he won't answer." The nanny had been by Nancy's side since childhood, accustomed to seeing Benjamin dote on her. Seeing such a stark contrast now instantly made her eyes redden. "So must be held up by something. That's why he didn't answer the phone. Miss, please don't be sad, once he's finished. He will definitely come to take care of you right away. He cares about you so much. Before, when you just had a small cut on your finger, he was so anxious he wanted to take you to the hospital immediately. When you had period cramps, he would stay by your side constantly, making you brown sugar water and massaging your abdomen." Nancy closed her eyes, tears silently falling. Yes, that Benjamin who would anxiously pace around for her ultimately died in the memories. 2 days later, Nancy's fever broke. She was packing the medicine she needed to take home when her phone suddenly vibrated. Melissa sent a long string of messages. "Nancy, you poor thing, you still don't know, do you? That marriage certificate between you and Benjamin is fake. He never wanted to marry you in the first place, which is why he used a forged document to placate you. To be so deceived by the husband you loved with all your heart, don't you think your life is a complete failure? Haven't you always thought of me as the other woman who came between you two? Well, let me tell you, Benjamin has already agreed to register our marriage. Tomorrow, he'll send you away and take me to the Civil Affairs Bureau to make it official. From now on, I will be Benjamin's lawful wife, and you'll be the other woman, facing Melissa's provocation." Nancy calmly put away her phone, her eyes now devoid of any emotion. She simply went to find the doctor who had performed her abortion, retrieved the frozen embryonic remains, and handed them to a courier, asking him to deliver this carefully packaged gift to Benjamin at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow. After completing all of this, she went through the discharge procedures. As soon as she got home, she saw that Benjamin had returned, and the table was piled with gifts, which he said were for her. If it were before, Nancy would have been very happy, thinking he was spoiling her. But now she knew that he was only compensating her with material things because he felt guilty. She glanced over it briefly, not paying much attention to these things, said thank you, and was about to head back to the bedroom. Benjamin stopped her. "Nancy, there's been an issue with the company's recent collaboration project, and I have to stay behind to handle it. Could you go to Antarctica alone first? I've already arranged everything there, and someone will accompany you throughout. Once I've sorted things out here, I'll fly over to join you." "All right." Nancy turned her back to him, a bitter smile curling at the corner of her lips, using work as an excuse. Actually going to accompany Melissa to get the marriage certificate. Benjamin, did the 16-year-old you ever imagine that the 26-year-old you would betray me so deeply? Fine. She replied without turning her head, her voice terrifyingly calm. Benjamin was stunned, the explanations and coaxing he had prepared all stuck in his throat, leaving him momentarily at a loss for words. Such a straightforward Nancy felt so unfamiliar it unsettled him. Just as he was about to say something, Melissa sent a message saying she had sprained her ankle. Benjamin glanced at Nancy's retreating figure, and in the end, he only hurriedly said, "Something came up at the company," before grabbing his coat and leaving. The next day, early morning, on the way to the Civil Affairs Bureau, Benjamin held the steering wheel with one hand, feeling restless, as if something major was about to happen. While waiting at a red light, he finally frowned, took out his phone, and couldn't resist sending a message to Nancy. "Nancy, have you set off yet?" It wasn't until they arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau that Nancy finally replied to the message. It was a photo taken at the airport, along with a sentence. "Yes, I'm at the airport now. The flight will take off in 5 minutes. Benjamin, I've prepared a gift for you. Remember to check it." Upon seeing this message, Benjamin felt extremely anxious, and his eyelids kept twitching uncontrollably. He clicked on her number and was about to call to ask what gift. Melissa pulled his hand and acted coquettishly. "It's almost our turn. Benjamin, stop playing with your phone." He struggled internally for a few seconds, but ultimately didn't press the call button and put the phone back in his pocket. Half an hour later, he and Melissa both stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau's door, holding 2 freshly issued marriage certificates in their hands. Just as he was about to get in the car and leave, a courier suddenly rushed in through the door, holding a package and walking up to him. "Mr. Benjamin, is that you? This is a gift prepared for you by Ms. Nancy. Please inspect it in person." Nancy's gift, why was it delivered here? How could she possibly know he was at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Benjamin's mind went blank, feeling as if his heart was about to leap out of his chest. His thoughts were in complete disarray, and under the courier's urging, he signed for the package. Then, with trembling hands, he opened the sealed parcel. Benjamin's trembling fingers finally tore open the package's seal. The moment the package was fully opened, a piercing chill seeped out from within. It was a transparent medical container, and inside was a fully formed infant embryo, suspended in icy preservation fluid. Accompanying it was a hospital instruction sheet. MS. Nancy, 12 weeks pregnant, voluntary termination of pregnancy. The date above was clearly the third day after their argument. Benjamin, his pupils suddenly contracted, and all the blood in his body seemed to freeze in that moment. All that remained in his ears was the sound of his own frantic heartbeat. His vision blurred for an instant, and the paper in his hand was almost crushed by his grip. What is this? The next second, a letter fell out of the package. I once thought love was eternal, but later I realized that people's hearts can change. Our child is returned to you. Don't look for me. We're over. Nancy. The child, his and Nancy's child, had vanished without a trace. And he didn't even know of its existence. What is this? Melissa leaned in, reaching out curiously to take the paper. Benjamin suddenly snapped back to reality, pushing her away so hard she nearly fell. 3 months. She was pregnant with my child back then. His Adam's apple bobbed, his voice dry as if scraped by sandpaper. Melissa's face instantly turned deathly pale as she frantically tried to snatch the paper. Benjamin, don't believe this. It must have been forged by Nancy. She just can't stand to see us happy. Slap. Benjamin swatted her hand away with such force that Melissa staggered back several steps, her wrist immediately turning red. This was the first time he had ever been angry with her. The disgust churning in his eyes was like ice water, drenching Melissa in a chilling cold. Forged. Benjamin picked up the surgical consent form. The handwriting in Nancy's signature area trembled slightly from the pressure. She called me 6 times the day she was hospitalized, and I was by your side. The night before her surgery, I took you away from your wedding. The day she went to the Civil Affairs Bureau with a fake marriage certificate, I was busy preparing the villa for you. With each word he spoke, his voice grew heavier, until by the end it seemed to be forced through gritted teeth. All the details he had deliberately ignored now flooded his mind like a frenzy. Her increasingly pale face, the way she always avoided his gaze, her weakness after the miscarriage when she couldn't even hold onto the stair railing. It wasn't that she was overly sensitive or quick to anger. He had personally driven her to the brink. Don't come any closer. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse, his eyes filled with a disgust and anger she had never seen before. Did you know she was pregnant all along? Did you? Melissa was frightened by his reaction, her face pale as she shook her head. I didn't know. Benjamin, what's wrong with you? Benjamin didn't pay attention to her excuses. His mind flashed with images of Nancy's pale face, her solitary figure heading to the hospital, her cold gaze. Everything had been traceable all along. He pulled out his phone and frantically dialed Nancy's number, but all he heard from the receiver was a cold automated message. The number you have dialed cannot be reached at the moment. His hands trembled as he opened WeChat, only to find a glaring red exclamation mark next to the message. He had actually been blocked. All means of contact had been completely severed. No, it can't be. She wouldn't ignore me. Benjamin's voice carried an unprecedented panic as he turned and rushed toward the parking lot, completely ignoring Melissa's cries behind him. Benjamin, where are you going? We just got our marriage license. He jumped into the car, slammed the accelerator to the floor, and the car shot out like an arrow released from its bow. The scenery outside the window flew by in reverse, yet his mind was filled entirely with Nancy's image, the way she smiled and called him Benjamin, the way she tearfully questioned him, her terrifyingly calm final gaze. He had always thought she would never leave him, never expected. Nancy, wait for me, he murmured, his fingers nearly crushing the steering wheel. The airport announcements echoed in his ears as Benjamin rushed into the terminal, frantically searching for international flight information. When he finally found Nancy's flight on the massive electronic screen, 3 cold words displayed: departed. He stumbled to the floor-to-ceiling window just in time to see an airplane streak across the sky, gradually disappearing into the clouds. At that moment, Benjamin felt as if all strength had been drained from his body. Slowly kneeling to the ground, before his eyes appeared Nancy's last message to him: I've prepared a gift for you, remember to check for it. That wasn't a farewell, but a judgment. He had personally destroyed their marriage, their child, and the girl who once had eyes only for him. The noise of the airport gradually faded away. Benjamin's world was left with nothing but boundless silence. Benjamin sat in the empty office, his fingers tracing over the dense information on the computer screen. His eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept for 3 days, He had mobilized the Brandon family's entire network of connections, even going so far as to hire a private investigator at great expense, yet he couldn't find even a single trace of Nancy. The assistant's voice carried an unmistakable weariness. Mr. Benjamin, MS, Nancy's ID card and bank card information have all been cancelled, and her social media accounts have been cleared out. It's as if she's completely vanished from this world. Benjamin suddenly clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. The girl who always followed him, even reporting her travel itinerary before going abroad, was now determined to completely disappear from his world. The office door was gently pushed open. Melissa walked in holding a bowl of soup, wearing a lotus root pink dress that was Nancy's favorite style. Benjamin, I made you some bird's nest soup. You haven't eaten properly for days, she imitated Nancy's gentle tone. Trying to hand him the soup bowl, Benjamin jerked away as if scalded, his brows furrowed tightly. Who allowed you into my office? Melissa's hand froze mid-air, the smile on her face instantly stiffening. Ever since she moved into Brandon's mansion, she had deliberately imitated Nancy's ways. She prepared honeyed lemon water for him in the mornings, left a lamp on for him in the study at night. Even copied her dressing style and favorite perfume scents, yet all she ever received in return were his cold stares. I can see you're too tired, she whispered in defense, trying to push the soup bowl a little closer. Take it away. Benjamin's voice was as cold as ice. I don't like this brand of bird's nest. Nancy never buys the wrong one. As soon as the words were spoken, both of them froze. Melissa's face instantly turned deathly pale, her nails digging deep into her palms. It's Nancy again. These past few days, he's always been like this, muttering to himself while reading documents, staring blankly at the empty seat during meals, and even calling out that name in his sleep. Suppressing the resentment in her heart, she slammed the soup bowl heavily onto the table. I am your wife. Benjamin, what exactly do I need to do for you to look at me? Benjamin ignored her and stood up to walk out of the office. He needed to breathe some fresh air. Otherwise that omnipresent feeling of suffocation would drive him mad. Returning home, the enormous villa felt terrifyingly empty. The servant told him that Melissa had redecorated Nancy's former bedroom, changing it to the European style she preferred. Benjamin kicked the bedroom door open violently, staring at the glaring crystal chandelier on the wall and the luxurious carpet on the floor. He felt nothing but disgust. He frantically tore away all the unfamiliar decorations. Nancy. He reached out to touch the blurred lines, his eyes turning red. At that moment, his gaze fell upon a cardboard box in the corner. Inside it were the ashes of the miscellaneous items that had been burned by Nancy that day. As if suddenly remembering something, he crouched down frantically and began rummaging through the ashes with his bare hands. Sharp fragments cut his fingers, and blood dripped into the box, but he remained completely unaware, until his fingertip touched a photograph. He abruptly stopped. It was half of a photo that hadn't been completely burned. In the photo, Nancy was wearing a white dress, standing in the sunlight with a radiant smile, her eyes curved like crescent moons, and two shallow dimples at the corners of her mouth. It was taken on the day of their engagement. She was holding the ring in her hand, her eyes filled with hope for the future. Benjamin carefully cradled the photo in his hands, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. He remembered how shy she had been that day, when she whispered to him, "Will we be together forever?" And at that moment, he had kissed her forehead and answered with certainty, "Of course." But now, he had shattered her dreams with his own hands, forcing her to flee to a distant land, even going so far as to erase all traces of her existence. All just to escape him. He sat on the cold floor holding the photograph, staying awake the entire night. Outside the window, the sky shifted from pitch black to the pale white of dawn, then from that pale white to a dazzling golden hue, yet he remained in the same position, allowing regret and pain to consume him. Melissa, when she woke up in the morning, this was the scene that greeted her. Benjamin was curled up in the corner, clutching half a photograph tightly in his hand. His face streaked with tears, muttering incessantly under his breath, "Nancy, I'm sorry, please come back." She stood at the doorway, watching the man who was utterly indifferent to her yet tormented for the sake of another woman, the resentment in her heart growing wildly. She couldn't understand where she fell short compared to Nancy, and why no matter what she did, she could never find her way into Benjamin's heart. Melissa shot him a resentful glance, then turned and left the bedroom. As the plane landed in Paris, a light rain was falling from the sky. Nancy pulled her suitcase out of the airport, gazing at the unfamiliar foreign land, finally feeling the reality that she had completely left Benjamin behind. From today onward, she was just an ordinary person needing to put down new roots in a foreign country. Using her remaining savings, she rented a small apartment in the old town, then spent 3 full days tidying the room. She folded the few old clothes she brought into the wardrobe, placed an easel she picked up from a flea market in front of the desk, and finally tore up the copy of the forged marriage certificate and threw it in the trash. After doing all this, Nancy felt as if she had been reborn. Before coming to Paris, she reapplied for admission to study art and design, and today, she finally received the acceptance letter from that internationally top-tier art academy to cover her tuition and rent. She found a part-time job at a gallery near the school. The gallery was tucked away at the end of a narrow alley. The wind chimes would jingle when the door was pushed open, and the air was always filled with a faint fragrance. Nancy's job was to organize drawings, and occasionally she also helped receive guests. She always kept her head down, with her bangs covering most of her face, quietly going about her own tasks. The days passed peacefully until one rainy afternoon, a man walked in. He was wearing a trench coat, holding a scroll of ancient painting in his hands, tall and gentle in expression. "What can I help you with?" The man smiled and reached out his hand to her. "I'm the curator of this gallery, Claude." Nancy's cheeks instantly turned bright red. "Sorry, I didn't recognize you." Claude's smile was very gentle. "I've been too busy lately and haven't had many opportunities to visit the gallery. We'll be seeing more of each other from now on, from this day on." The two often exchanged their views on art together. He was recently preparing for a manuscript restoration exhibition when he happened to see Nancy staring blankly at a damaged painting. Claude spoke, his voice clear and mellow. "What are you thinking about?" Nancy suddenly snapped back to reality and hurriedly lowered her head. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have touched the exhibit without permission." Claude smiled instead, gently tapping the painting with his fingertip. "It's all right. Being able to observe here shows you have a good eye for art." He noticed the still wet paint on her fingertips and followed her gaze to the workbench, where a sketch she had drawn was spread out. "Do you like painting?" he asked casually, without any probing intent. Nancy pressed her lips together and didn't answer. In the following days, Claude always appeared in the afternoon. He never mentioned her past, but occasionally, when passing by her workstation, he would stop to offer a few pointers. Adding some shadows here would make it richer, or when she was troubled by a restoration task, he would hand her a note filled with annotations and comforting words, his handwriting as neat and gentle as he was. "You've already done very well, no need to worry too much." But on this day, the gallery suddenly encountered a difficult customer. The wealthy merchant pointed at a painting and kept making things difficult for Nancy, despite her repeated explanations. He scolded her for pretending to understand what she didn't, and even reached out to grab her work ID. Just as she clenched her fists and prepared to step back, Claude appeared from nowhere, his tone calm yet carrying undeniable authority. "Sir, the works in our gallery may not be suitable for you. Please leave." He turned sideways to shield Nancy behind him, firmly holding her shoulder, which was very reassuring. After the guest left in disappointment, Nancy looked at the teacup he handed her. And her fingertips finally felt some warmth. That night while working overtime organizing the drawings, she was troubled by a torn medieval manuscript. Claude appeared at the door again, holding a cup of hot milk with fine droplets condensed on the cup's surface. He placed the milk beside her hand. "Restoring ancient paintings is like mending a human heart. It can't be rushed. It requires warming it up bit by bit with patience." He didn't say anything more, just sat at the desk across from her flipping through materials. The desk lamp cast the shadows of the two onto the wall, and it was so quiet they could hear each other breathing. Nancy's heart gave a sudden flutter, as if something had gently bumped against it. A moment later, Claude smiled and pushed his glasses up. "If you don't mind, I can teach you the techniques for restoring ancient paintings. It might give you some new ideas." As the autumn atmosphere deepened, Nancy looked into his eyes and finally nodded. At some point, she no longer felt the confusion and pain she once had. Claude stayed by her side, and over time, his presence gave her the courage to gradually forget the pain of the past. Benjamin's study was lit throughout the night, the computer screen displaying the latest report from the private investigator. They still haven't found Nancy's trace. Melissa stood outside the door holding the ginseng soup, listening to the sighs coming from inside, her nails digging deep into her palms. The servants at home were all gossiping behind her back, saying that the master didn't have her, the new wife, in his heart at all. She could no longer just sit back and wait like this. Back in the bedroom, she dug out a fake pregnancy test from the back of a drawer. She was going to use a child to win back Benjamin's attention. Melissa practiced in front of the mirror countless times until she was sure every expression looked exactly like that of a first-time mother. The next morning at breakfast, she pretended to accidentally drop the pregnancy test in front of Benjamin. Benjamin glanced at her, then lowered his eyes to the paper, his brow instantly tightening. Melissa hurriedly bent to pick it up, her voice feigning deliberate panic. "I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you later. Benjamin, we're having a baby." The air suddenly froze. Benjamin lifted his head, his eyes holding no trace of anticipation, only a cold, icy disgust. He picked it up and examined it carefully. They hadn't been intimate for a long time, how could she possibly be pregnant all of a sudden? His voice was as cold as ice. Show me the hospital visit records. All of them. Melissa's smile froze on her face. I haven't had time to go to the hospital yet, but pregnancy tests are accurate. Then let's go now, I'll go with you. Benjamin put down his knife and fork, his gaze cold. I'll have the driver prepare the car. We leave in half an hour. There was no room for negotiation in his tone. Those eyes, which had always held a smile when looking at Nancy, now seemed to pierce through all her disguises. The smell of disinfectant in the hospital corridor was pungent. When the doctor came out holding a blank examination report, he said calmly, Mrs. Pay is not pregnant. Melissa's face instantly drained of all color. Benjamin snatched the report, his knuckles turning white from the force, and strode toward the end of the corridor without looking back. Benjamin, Melissa called after him, but he refused to turn back no matter what. Back at the villa that Melissa had forcibly converted into their marital home, she was still trying to explain herself. Benjamin, I'm just so afraid of losing you. You keep looking for Nancy all day. Shut up. Benjamin slammed the report on her face. Did you think a fake child could trap me? Melissa, you and your pathetic tricks disgust me. He swung his arm and violently pushed the living room display cabinet. Melissa's carefully selected enamel ornaments, custom couple sculptures, all crashed to the ground with a clatter, fragments scattering at her feet. Benjamin. Melissa screamed and rushed forward to grab his sleeve. How dare you treat me like this? I gave up my wedding for you, cut ties with my family for you. Nancy left long ago. Why won't you just look at me? Because you will never be as good as her. Benjamin's voice trembled. She wouldn't stoop to such underhanded tactics either. As he turned to leave, Melissa's phone fell out, its screen lighting up. Benjamin bent down to pick it up, his eyes scanning the messages in that instant. You're so pathetic, even your marriage certificate is fake. Benjamin is taking me to get our marriage certificate tomorrow. You're just an unwanted abandoned wife. He doesn't love you anymore. Your very existence is a joke. Every word, every phrase, was like a needle dipped in poison, stabbing into his temples until they throbbed violently. He remembered Nancy on the day of her miscarriage, when she called him 6 times only to receive 3 seconds of. He remembered her fainting at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau while he was holding Melissa's hand dreaming about the future. He remembered her increasingly pale face that he had ignored. So she had been bearing all this alone. No, Melissa cried out, rushing forward when she saw him snatch the phone. Were these words all said by you? Benjamin asked, his fingers trembling as they gripped the phone, his knuckles turning white as if about to crush the screen. He suddenly looked up, his eyes blazing with fury. Is this how you treated her? Saying these things to her when she just lost her child? Melissa was frightened by the ferocity in his eyes and stepped back, but she still stubbornly retorted, so what if I did? Who told her to cling to your side? I wanted her to know just how miserably she lost. Get out. Benjamin's voice was terrifyingly hoarse, each word seeming to be squeezed out from between clenched teeth. Get out of here. And never show your face in front of me again. Melissa watched his retreating back as he slammed the door, her nails digging deep into her palms. She stared fixedly at the fragments on the floor, a venomous smile curling at the corner of her mouth. Nancy, you think you can live in peace? No way, if I'm not doing well. You won't be doing well either. The rain outside the window grew heavier and heavier, beating against the glass with a dull sound. I will definitely make you pay. The late autumn in Paris saw an art exchange event held at a French art gallery. Nancy stood in front of her exhibition booth, her fingertips nervously curling. Her designed work, titled Rebirth, was the result of 3 months of late nights and unexpectedly garnered the attention of many art connoisseurs. Don't be nervous, Claude. A powerful voice came from beside her. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne, his gaze gentle and steady. Your work has vitality. Those who understand will naturally see it. He smoothed her slightly disheveled hair and handed her the champagne. Come, let me introduce you to a few curators. They've been looking to collaborate with emerging artists. Nancy followed him through the crowd. Claude always enthusiastically recommended her work to everyone. Nancy has a unique understanding and a strong perception of art. Facing the swarming media, he consistently positioned himself in front of her, intercepting tricky questions on her behalf, leaving only gentle guidance so she could speak confidently and at length about her work. And thanks to her excellent presentation, a Swiss collector even offered to buy all the work she had on display. Nancy was beyond words with surprise, instinctively looking toward Claude. Meanwhile, Claude's eyes shimmered with an approving smile. He winked at her, silently conveying encouragement. Yet all of this was noticed by a pair of eyes in the corner. Benjamin's assistant, who was accompanying a partner on a European market visit, held a lit phone screen at that moment, the camera aimed at that familiar yet distant figure. He zoomed in on the photo, watching Nancy smile at Claude, watching the man's thumb inadvertently brush against her earlobe, the two of them standing extremely close. That same day, the assistant immediately reported the matter to Benjamin. "Mr. Benjamin, we've found Ms. Nancy. She's in Paris attending an art exhibition with an unfamiliar man. They're behaving very intimately. He appears to be a local curator." He attached several photos taken from tricky angles, showing warm scenes of the two smiling at each other. In the late-night office, Benjamin stared at his phone screen, his knuckles turning white. In the photo, Nancy wore an elegant long dress, her face bearing a composed smile he had never seen before, and the bespectacled man looked at her with a tenderness that seemed to overflow. He recalled his assistant's words about their intimate behavior, remembered how she had been shielded behind that man, and a fire seemed to burn in his chest, consuming all his reason. "Book the fastest flight to Paris," he growled into the phone, the jealousy in his voice almost piercing through the receiver. "Benjamin, you can't go." Melissa had barged into the office at some point, tear stains still fresh on her face. "She's with another man now. Why are you still going after her? We're the married couple." Benjamin looked up, his eyes cold as ice. "Husband and wife," he sneered. "All of this was obtained through your lies." Melissa turned pale and rushed forward to snatch the documents, but he pushed her away. "How did I never realize before how skilled you are at acting? From pretending to sprain your ankle to fabricating chat records, from driving a wedge between me and Nancy to deceiving me with a fake pregnancy. Melissa, your methods are becoming increasingly sophisticated." "No, it's just that I love you too much," Melissa cried, grabbing at his sleeve, only to be disgustedly shaken off by Benjamin. "Love?" The disgust in his eyes was almost piercing enough to stab through a person. "Your love is destroying someone else's life. If you hadn't set me up back then, Nancy and I would never have ended up like this." He called for his bodyguard, his voice cold and devoid of any warmth. "Take her back to the villa. She is not to step one foot outside the gate without my permission." Melissa was still screaming as she was dragged away, cursing Nancy. But Benjamin was no longer listening. He grabbed his suit jacket and rushed to the airport, getting into the driver's car. The private jet's engines roared on the runway. And more than 10 hours later, the plane landed at Paris airport. Benjamin stepped out of the cabin door, the cold autumn wind rushing into his collar, yet he felt no chill at all. He gripped his phone tightly, looking at the address his assistant had sent. His thumb brushed over Nancy's smiling face on the screen, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. This time, he would never let go again. The morning gallery carried a faint, fresh fragrance. Nancy was dusting the gallery's artworks with her head lowered when footsteps suddenly sounded behind her. "Sorry, we're not open yet." After she finished speaking, the other party did not respond, but instead stopped walking and fell into even deeper silence. Nancy froze all over, suddenly having a bad premonition. She turned around abruptly and crashed into Benjamin's bloodshot eyes. He had lost so much weight that his suit jacket hung loosely on his shoulders, and the dark circles under his eyes were even more terrifying. "Nancy," his voice was hoarse, but the familiar tone sent chills down Nancy's spine. "I know I was wrong. Come home with me, okay?" Nancy dropped what she was holding with a sharp thud on the floor. After the shock, disgust surged up like a tide. She took half a step back, her spine pressed against the cold display case. "Mr. Benjamin, we have nothing to do with each other anymore." "We do." Benjamin stepped forward, wanting to grab her wrist, but she sharply dodged away. "Listen to me. It was all Melissa's scheme back then. She fabricated chat records, pretended to commit suicide to pressure me." "Enough." Nancy cut him off, her voice icy cold. "Whose fault it was doesn't matter anymore. I'm doing very well now. I don't need your explanations, and I certainly won't go back with you." Benjamin's eyes suddenly turned pitiful. He grabbed her arm abruptly, his grip so strong it almost crushed her bones. "I'm begging you, I won't allow you to stay here with that man." His gaze swept over the workbench, taking in the traces of their life together, and jealousy instantly overwhelmed his reason. "Come with me, right now." "Let her go." A sharp, clear shout rang out. Claude appeared at the doorway at some unknown moment. His expression was sinister as he rushed over in a few strides, grabbing Benjamin's wrist tightly, his knuckles turning white from the force. "Can't you hear her refusal? You're hurting her." Benjamin was momentarily startled by the fury in his eyes, then sneered coldly. "I'm speaking with my beloved. Who are you to interrupt? She is not your woman." Claude gently pulled Nancy behind him, positioning himself in front of her. "She is free now and has the right to choose her own life. Forcing her like this is no different from kidnapping." Benjamin's gaze swept past him, fixed intently on Claude behind Nancy. She kept her head lowered, her long hair covering her profile, her fingers tightly clutched Claude's sleeve, and only her tightly pressed lips betrayed her resistance. It was a complete sense of alienation, as if looking at a despised enemy. His heart felt as if it were being tightly squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain so intense he could barely breathe. He never imagined that one day Nancy would hide behind someone else, looking at him with such eyes. Nancy. Benjamin suddenly regained his senses. His voice trembling as he released his grip, Claude immediately held Nancy tighter. Please leave and don't disturb her again. Benjamin watched the intimate figures of the two walking away side by side, his heart feeling as if cut by a knife. He staggered back a few steps, bumping into the display shelf. The picture frames swayed and made soft sounds, as if mocking his wretched state. At the art exhibition auction the next day, the atmosphere was lively. Nancy's Rebirth series caused a sensation, with bidding voices rising one after another. When the price soared to €1 million, a deep voice suddenly came from the back row. 10 million. The entire hall erupted in uproar. Everyone turned around and saw Benjamin sitting in the shadows, holding up his bidding paddle with an expressionless face. He was determined to win, no matter what price others called out. He immediately raised it. 20 million, 30 million. Everyone was whispering, saying this Asian man must be crazy, but only Benjamin himself knew that he was very calm. Nancy's works were ultimately sold for a sky-high price of €30 million, with all 5 of Nancy's exhibited pieces being purchased. According to the rules, the highest bidder has the right to a private exchange with the creator. When the assistant informed Nancy of this news, she was organizing her painting tools backstage. Claude held her slightly cool hand. If you don't want to see them, I'll go make an excuse. Nancy shook her head. No need. Some matters must be settled by me personally. As she turned and walked toward the reception room, her steps were steady. The sunlight from outside the window fell upon her, casting a golden halo, as if foretelling an inevitable farewell. In the reception room, Benjamin was stroking the half of a photograph he had retrieved from the ashes, his eyes filled with pain. He finally had the chance to speak with her face to face. Even if she refused to forgive him, he had to give it a try. Seeing Nancy walking toward him, Benjamin felt an inexplicable nervousness. Her gaze was calm as she sat opposite Benjamin, while he looked tense, his hand gripping the coffee cup tightly. Seeing those indifferent eyes, he didn't dare to speak, and could only bring up the bits and pieces of their past. Remember, you said you liked the lavender in Provence, so I immediately bought an estate there, just to take you to stay for a month every year during the blooming season. His voice carried a cautious tone of testing the waters. And that time on your birthday, I rented out the entire amusement park and had fireworks spell out your name in the night sky. Nancy paused as she lifted her teacup. Mr. Benjamin, what does what you're saying have to do with me? She lifted her eyes, her gaze as cold as ice. Benjamin's words caught in his throat. We don't have a marriage certificate, and we're not even publicly recognized as a couple. Hearing this, he froze in place. She gently set down the teacup, its base making a soft sound as it met the table. During those 2 years, you just needed a Nancy to be by your side. Not that you loved me. Even if it hadn't been me with you back then, it could have been anyone else. That's not true. Benjamin abruptly stood up, the chair legs scraping against the floor with a harsh sound. I'm different with you. Different. Nancy interrupted him, a faint, cold smile curling at the corner of her lips. Do you mean when you were drugged and forced yourself on me, then made me stay by your side? Her words were like an ice pick dipped in poison, piercing straight into Benjamin's heart. His face instantly turned deathly pale, and he staggered back half a step, bumping against the edge of the table. No. It's not like that, Nancy. I just had too much to drink, that's why. Being drunk is not an excuse for you to hurt me. Nancy's voice remained calm, yet carried an undeniable finality. You've never cared about my feelings, Benjamin. You only care about whether you can control everything, whether you can keep both your so-called white moonlight and cinnabar mole. Benjamin's lips trembled. All the words he wanted to say stuck in his throat. He looked at the woman before him. So calm she seemed almost a stranger, and suddenly realized that the sweet memories he thought could win her back had long turned into unbearable irony in her heart. I do love you, Nancy. I just never saw my own heart clearly. His voice was hoarse, carrying a desperate plea. Give me a chance to make it right, please. Nancy didn't look at him again, just raised her hand to glance at her wristwatch. Just at that moment, the lounge door was gently pushed open. Nancy, it's about time. Claude stood at the doorway, holding her coat in his hand, his gaze gently resting on her. Nancy as she stood up. Benjamin clearly saw that the moment she turned and walked toward Claude, a smile lifted the corner of her mouth. That smile wasn't polite or distant, but carried genuine happiness and relaxation. Benjamin stared blankly for a long time, his gaze fixed on the two retreating figures. Claude naturally draped his coat over her shoulders and smoothed the stray hairs tousled by the wind. "Aren't you cold? It's drizzling outside." "Not bad." Nancy looked up to answer him, her eyes curved into crescents, revealing a genuine ease of heart that Benjamin hadn't seen in a long time. The two walked away side by side, their figures turning at the end of the corridor and disappearing from sight. Benjamin stood frozen in place, his heart feeling as if a piece had been brutally carved out, the pain so intense he could barely breathe. It turned out she wasn't incapable of smiling, it was just that her tenderness and joy no longer had anything to do with him. That night, rain began to fall over Paris. Benjamin knelt on the street below Nancy's apartment building, letting the rain soak through his suit. He looked up at the lit window on the third floor, clutching the photo of them together tightly in his hand. The rain grew heavier, his consciousness gradually blurred, yet he stubbornly remained kneeling. He saw the light turn on in that window, saw the curtain pulled open a crack, then abruptly shut again. He knew she had seen him, but until daybreak, that door never opened. When the morning cleaner found him, he was already frozen unconscious, still clutching tightly in his arms that photo long wrinkled by the rain. On the third floor of the apartment, Nancy stood behind the curtain, watching the ambulance carry Benjamin away. Her fingertips were icy cold. And it wasn't until Claude handed her a cup of warm milk that she slowly came back to her senses. "It's all in the past," Claude spoke softly, without pressing further, just quietly accompanying her as they watched the gradually brightening sky outside the window. Nancy nodded, then turned and drew the curtains completely shut. The rain outside the window continued to fall, but she knew that some things, once lost, could never be regained. Nancy had locked herself in the studio for 3 days because of Benjamin's harassment. She seemed to have become emotionally unstable, unwilling to see anyone. On the third day, Claude knocked on the door. He didn't mention Benjamin fainting after kneeling downstairs, just stood at the doorway holding his painting kit. "The maple trees in the suburbs have turned red. Want to go see?" As the car left the city, Nancy kept staring blankly at the passing plane tree leaves outside the window. It wasn't until they reached the mountain path covered with fallen leaves that Claude parked the car by the stream, and she finally pushed the car door open. The late autumn breeze felt pleasant on the skin, the stream splashed with fine droplets, and the maple forest on the opposite bank was like a blazing flame, beautifully crimson. "Want to give it a try?" Claude handed her a pen while setting up his easel to sketch the stream. Gazing at the beautiful natural scenery, Nancy spread her arms wide, feeling completely healed throughout her body. I don't know how much time had passed before the charcoal pencil made its first mark on the paper. She suddenly spoke, her voice as light as a sigh. "Benjamin used to be my boss. I spent 2 ambiguous years with him." Claude paused, the hand holding the paintbrush, not turning around, just listening quietly. Nancy's tears fell without warning. She remembered Benjamin crashing the wedding that day. Remembered the fake embossed seal on their sham marriage certificate. Remembered the suffocating feeling before the anesthesia on the operating table. Those painful memories she had desperately suppressed deep within suddenly became vivid amidst the sound of the stream and the wind. She spoke intermittently, from the childhood sweethearts of their youth, to Melissa's appearance, to that marriage in name only, to the coquettish voice of Melissa in Benjamin's phone call on the day of her abortion. Claude never interrupted, only handing her a clean handkerchief when she choked up. By the time she finally finished speaking, the sun was nearly setting. Claude put down his paintbrush and looked at her seriously. "Nancy, being hurt was never your fault. You don't have to punish yourself by staying trapped in the past because of anyone's malice." Nancy gazed at the painting on the easel, tears welling up in her eyes once more, but this time with a warmth of relief. She suddenly smiled, wiping away her tears. "You paint so beautifully." Claude picked up the drawing board. "I'd like to paint a portrait of you." He had her sit under the maple tree, where sunlight filtered through the branches and leaves, falling upon her hair. Nancy was a bit reserved at first, but gradually relaxed under his gentle gaze. Her fingers unconsciously twisting the hem of her clothes, a lingering smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. Claude paused for a moment, his brushstrokes light, his eyes tender as he looked at her. When the drawing was completed, the sun was almost setting. Claude handed her the painting. In it, her brows and eyes were relaxed, no longer carrying the tension and timidity of before. "This is the real you," he said softly. Nancy touched the drawing paper, and a sudden warmth welled up in her heart. It turns out that being truly seen and treated with gentleness feels like this. On the ride back that night, she slept soundly, her brows no longer furrowed in her dreams. Finally relaxed, Claude watched her quietly, unable to resist gently stroking her cheek. Ever since their first meeting, he had developed a soft spot for her, unable to bear seeing such a kind-hearted girl suffer so much. Recalling the scene a few days ago when Benjamin came to the gallery to harass her, he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his expression darkening imperceptibly in that unobserved moment. However, just as everything was slowly getting better, Melissa sat in front of the computer, looking at the report about Nancy's design exhibition on the screen, her eyes filled with venomous resentment. She opened her social media account and posted a lengthy post, in words dripping with blood and tears. She accused the other woman, Nancy, of how she had meddled in her relationship with Benjamin, and how she had continued to cling on even after she and Benjamin had obtained their marriage certificate. At the end of the text, she attached a photo of her and Benjamin's marriage certificate, the red cover glaring sharply on the screen. She's now a famous designer abroad, but who knows, her reputation was built by trampling on someone else's marriage, Melissa sneered at the screen. Pressing the send button with her finger, within just a few hours, this post began to spread rapidly online. Nancy's name was pushed to the top of the trending searches, with netizens digging up every detail about her design works and study abroad experiences, knowing his taken but still getting involved. Homewrecker, shameless. The comment section was flooded with insults, and some radical netizens even found the address of her gallery, leaving threats to ruin her reputation. Melissa scrolled through those vicious comments, picked up her glass of red wine, and downed it in one gulp. The moonlight outside the window fell on her twisted, smiling face, carrying the satisfaction of successful revenge. Nancy, didn't you want to start over abroad? I'm determined to nail you to the pillar of shame, so you can never hold your head up again. Ever since Melissa posted the rumors about Nancy online, the public opinion has gradually spread to France, because of this false news. Nancy actually received a lot of private messages and harassment. That day, as she sat in front of the computer browsing the news, Claude had just placed a warmed glass of milk by her hand when the push notification headline that popped up on the screen made him frown. Renowned Chinese-American designer Nancy exposed for meddling in a tycoon's marriage, legal wife posts evidence to accuse. Nancy. When she clicked into it, Melissa's lengthy post had already been circulating for 8 hours. The marriage certificate in the illustration was glaringly red, with words filled with lamentations about a third party intruding into the marriage. The comment section had long been flooded by outraged netizens, with foul language surging like a tide toward her social media account. Claude held her slightly cold hand. "I'll have the lawyer handle it." Nancy smiled instead, a faint smile carrying a sense of relief that came from seeing through everything completely. No need. Since she wants to make a scene, let her. Once the clown finishes performing, it's time for the curtain to fall. She spoke lightly, as if victory was already within her grasp. Soon after, she stood up and walked into the study, retrieving a file folder from the safe. Inside was the marriage certificate forged by Benjamin 3 years ago, the audio recordings of Benjamin and Melissa secretly discussing how to deceive her back then, and all the provocative messages Melissa had sent her over the years. She kept every piece of evidence and every screenshot carefully, just so that on a day like this, she could protect herself. At 8 p.m. that evening, Nancy's personal website updated with a statement: no emotional justifications, only a cold chain of evidence. Forged documents were placed at the top, followed by chat records and harassing messages arranged chronologically, including the original audio file. Finally, she added, "I have never had a legal marital relationship with Mr. Benjamin. The two of them conspired to deceive me for years. How could I possibly be the one interfering?" After this statement was released, the internet exploded instantly. "The marriage certificate is fake. This guy is such a scumbag. He's the real fraud." So it turns out Melissa was the mistress herself, and now she's trying to shift the blame and call someone else the homewrecker. How shameless. My heart aches for the designer. Not only was she deceived by a scumbag, but she also has to endure false accusations from the mistress and get cyberbullied by the entire internet. I support Nancy in defending her rights. As soon as these words were spoken, public opinion completely reversed. Melissa's social media accounts were flooded by outraged netizens, with labels like vicious mistress and the real homewrecker dominating the trending searches. The carefully crafted victim image she had built shattered into nothing, becoming the object of ridicule across the entire internet. Just then, Benjamin's public relations team released a video. He stood at the entrance of the Paris theater, his face as pale as a sheet, speaking word by word into the camera. "My marriage with Melissa has been a coercion from the very beginning. I never loved her. The marriage certificate is nothing but a worthless piece of paper she forced me to sign using despicable means. Hereby, I formally declare the marriage invalid." He paused, his eyes reddening at the corners, his voice deliberately choked with emotion. "Nancy, I'm sorry. I want to take this opportunity to express my remorse and love for you to the entire internet. I can't undo the hurt I caused in the past, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making amends. Please give me another chance. As soon as the video was posted, the hashtag #BenjaminApology shot to the top of the trending searches. But this time, netizens' reactions were surprisingly unanimous. Who are you performing for now? You and Melissa should just stay together forever. Let go of the great designer Nancy, her future is bright. Deceiving someone into marriage while entangled with your mistress, and now pretending to be devoted, disgusting. Who wants your love? This scumbag couple truly deserves each other, neither should go ruin other people's lives. Meanwhile, Melissa was sitting on the floor of Brandon's villa, staring at the overwhelming mockery on her phone screen, watching Benjamin's statement where he trampled her into the mud to win back Nancy. When she suddenly let out a piercing scream, "Ah, none of you will get away with this," she grabbed the crystal glass from the table and hurled it at the television. As the screen shattered, her sanity shattered along with it. She had lost. She had completely lost. The rain outside the window began to fall again. Nancy stood before the gallery's floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the trending search term that had popped up on her phone, and smiled faintly. Claude remained by her side, gently brushing away the stray strands of her hair. It's all over now. Yes, it's all over. The moment their eyes met, Nancy felt an unexpected wave of nervousness. Seeing the tips of his ears flushed red and listening to his steady heartbeat, she suddenly realized this man had always been so good to her. In the distance, the Eiffel Tower looked even more beautiful under the night sky. Those rotten memories were finally completely incinerated in this storm of public opinion, and her rebirth had only just begun. After this public opinion incident, more and more people began paying attention to Nancy's personal works, and she consequently became widely famous. Nancy's personal design exhibition opened at the gallery. On the opening day, a long queue formed outside the gallery, with camera flashes from the media flickering one after another. The theme of her art exhibition was breaking the cocoon. That wave of public opinion had transformed her from a controversial designer into a symbol of female awakening. People were curious about how this betrayed woman would use her brush to tear apart the constraints. At the center of the exhibition hall, the finale piece of the theme series hung in the most prominent position. On the canvas, a blue butterfly is struggling to break free from the spider's web, trying to swim away. And this painting is not just the theme of the exhibition, but also the theme of her life. Claude stood before the painting, his gaze gentle yet resolute. Having just purchased this piece privately last night, he was now softly explaining it to visitors. The spiderweb is a shackle from the past. But when the butterfly struggles free, it emerges toward the sunlight. Nancy wore a beige suit of her own design, with delicate butterfly patterns embroidered on the cuffs. She responded to questions with poise amidst the crowd, and whenever she turned her head, her eyes would meet Claude's gaze. He stood firmly by her side, like a silent sunlight enveloping her, allowing her to always feel its warmth, until a familiar figure came into view. Benjamin stood at the entrance of the exhibition hall, his suit impeccably pressed but unable to conceal his weariness. With a few stark white strands even visible in his hair, he held a bouquet of white roses in his hands, the petals still glistening with dewdrops. The moment their eyes met, Nancy didn't pause her steps in the slightest, her gaze so faint it seemed as if she wished not to see the person before her. "Nancy," Benjamin blocked her path, his voice hoarse like sandpaper grating. "I saw your painting, I know. I know how terribly wrong I was, but can I beg you one more time? Give me a chance. Let me, Mr. Benjamin." Nancy cut him off indifferently, her tone calm without a single ripple. "We ended long ago." She raised her hand and pointed at the painting. "Look, after the butterfly breaks free from the spider's web, it won't look back at that web. It has to fly toward the sea of flowers, not stay in place waiting to die." Her words carried hidden meaning. Benjamin followed her fingertip and looked. The butterfly's wings on the canvas were spread wide. He suddenly laughed, but it was uglier than crying, and the white roses in his hand scattered all over the ground. He understood Nancy's words, but there was no way he could change their past. Nancy didn't look at him again. Turning to walk toward Claude, the man naturally extended his hand. She gently took his arm, and the two walked side by side toward the depths of the exhibition hall, their silhouettes melting into a gentle painting under the warm yellow lights. As she passed by Benjamin, she didn't even glance back. All those entanglements of love and hate between them had long been left behind by her. She has a brighter future ahead. Benjamin stood in front of the painting for an entire afternoon. It wasn't until the closing bell rang that he slowly took a letter out of his pocket and gently placed it beneath the easel. The handwriting on the letter was messy, marked with tear stains that had yet to dry. "Nancy, I'm sorry. I once thought that possession was love and control was care, until I saw your painting and realized that true love should be letting go. Those moments I destroyed, that sincerity I betrayed, I can never redeem them even with a lifetime of atonement. I only hope that every step you take from now on will be in the sunlight, safe and joyful, with no more shadows. Early the next morning, Nancy found this letter while organizing her painting supplies. She opened it, glanced at it, then folded it back exactly as it was and placed it in the deepest part of her drawer. She wasn't planning to forgive him, she just no longer cared, unmoved by his feigned pitiful pleas to stay, unmoved by all the regret and so-called love he displayed. Since she wants to move towards a new life, she won't look back anymore. Claude walked in holding a cup of coffee. And seeing her smiling and stretching towards the window, he lightened his steps as he approached her. He smiled and leaned closer to her. What are you thinking about? Thinking about? Nancy turned to look at him, the light in her eyes brighter than on the canvas. The weather is so nice today, perfect for going sketching in the countryside. Claude nodded with a smile, reaching out to brush away the stray strands of hair from her face. Outside the gallery, the leaves of the phoenix trees swayed gently in the wind, like countless butterflies fluttering their wings, flying toward a sky without spiderwebs. Some farewells need not be announced, while some new beginnings will naturally bloom under the sunlight. Since Melissa was ridiculed across the internet, her daily movements have become extremely inconvenient. Whenever she steps outside, she feels as if everyone's eyes are fixed on her. She refuses to accept it, refuses to lose to Nancy like this, spending all day going crazy over the insults on her computer screen. She blames all her failures on Nancy, hating her for ruining her marriage, and hating her even more for now living a thriving and successful life. Since I can't have it, then Benjamin shouldn't expect to have it easy either. This thought coiled around her heart like a poisonous vine. The plan to get back at Benjamin had been circling in her mind, but she never found the right opportunity, until one day, she suddenly overheard her assistant's conversation at Brandon's Family Corporation. Brandon's family was about to launch the technology they had always been proud of, while other companies were all eyeing them covetously. Melissa crossed her arms, a slight smile curling at the corners of her lips, and left the company feeling quite satisfied. That night, after most people had left, she used Benjamin's spare access card, which he had left behind earlier, to secretly infiltrate Brandon's family group's core archives room. Relying on the password Benjamin had once casually mentioned in her memory, she actually managed to copy a project blueprint marked top secret into a USB drive. That is the Brandon family's top secret, the lifeblood of the next 5 years. Just selling it to a competitor is enough to severely damage Benjamin. She called the rival company. I have what you want. Come find me at the address this weekend. The meeting place was set at an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Over the weekend, Melissa carried the USB drive with a hint of madness on her face, but when she left, she didn't notice that not far behind her, Benjamin's car was quietly parked in the shadows. He had just returned from Paris and originally planned to handle the backlog of company affairs, but then received an urgent report from his special assistant. Mr. Benjamin, it's terrible. Miss Melissa used your access to enter the archives room and copied and sold all our most confidential documents and blueprints to a competing company. Benjamin started the car with a cold expression. Money for goods, hand to hand, in the warehouse. Melissa looked at the contact person sent by the rival company with a composed expression. Before coming, she had repeatedly confirmed the secrecy of this location, ensuring that only people from both sides were present in this space. Just as she handed the USB drive to the masked man, the warehouse lights suddenly turned on. She abruptly turned around and saw a man standing in the backlight. Who are you? Show yourself. Benjamin stepped out into the light, his face as dark as if it were about to drip with water, the chill in his eyes colder than a Parisian winter night. Melissa. You've got some nerve. Melissa was scared out of her wits, the USB drive in her hand clattering to the floor. Benjamin, let me explain. Explain how you betrayed me. Benjamin stepped closer, his leather shoes making dull sounds on the cement floor. Explain why you want to completely destroy Brandon's family. He didn't give her another chance to speak, tilting his chin toward the bodyguard behind him. Take her away. The bodyguard tied up the person sent by the rival company, then knocked Melissa unconscious and bundled her into the car. Melissa woke up again in a cold, damp basement, with only a dim yellow light bulb swaying overhead. Melissa was tied to a chair with her hands behind her back, watching two burly bodyguards cracking their knuckles, trembling all over in fear. Benjamin, you can't do this to me. We were husband and wife after all. Benjamin sat in the shadows of the corner, a cigarette held between his fingers, the crimson glow flickering on and off. Husband and wife, he sneered coldly. When you did those things to Nancy, why didn't you think about the fact that we were once husband and wife? Do it. When the bodyguard's fist landed on Melissa, she let out a piercing scream. Don't. At first she was still cursing Nancy, cursing Benjamin. but as the punches and kicks grew more frequent, her voice gradually turned into pleas for mercy. "Shut up." Hearing her cries, the bodyguard viciously kicked her in the abdomen, causing her to curl up in excruciating pain. The sharp pain from her broken ribs made her vision go dark, blood-flecked foam continuously spilling from the corner of her mouth. Her once delicate face was so swollen it no longer looked human. Benjamin remained coldly watching, not a ripple of emotion in his eyes. Seeing Melissa being mistreated, he felt no sympathy whatsoever. He only remembered Nancy's pale face on the day of her miscarriage. Remembered how she fainted at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, remembered the fear-filled look in her eyes when she hid behind Claude. At that time, she must have suffered 100, 1,000 times more than Melissa did at this moment. He will make Melissa repay for this pain bit by bit. "Benjamin, I was wrong. Please let me go." Beaten until covered in blood, Melissa could finally endure no more. She wept uncontrollably, snot and tears streaming down her face. Falling from the chair and dragging her broken leg as she crawled to his feet, her blood-stained hands desperately clutching at his trousers. "I'm sorry, I won't dare do it again. Please forgive me this time." Benjamin finally looked down at her, the disgust in his eyes almost enough to swallow her whole. "Forgive you." He crouched down, viciously grabbing her chin and forcing her to look up at him. "When you treated Nancy that way back then, did you ever give her forgiveness? When you sent those vicious texts to pressure her, did you ever think of letting her go? When you incited the online mob, were you ever filled with remorse?" He released his grip, throwing Melissa violently aside. She collapsed on the ground like a heap of mud, blood pooling beneath her. "Whatever you did to her, now you'll get it back twofold." Benjamin stood up, straightened his suit jacket, his tone terrifyingly calm. "You guys have fun here, just don't let her die." The iron door slammed shut with a bang, completely locking Melissa's wails in the darkness. After leaving the basement, Benjamin dialed the police. "Hello, I want to report a crime. There's been a commercial leak at Brandon's Family Corporation. The suspect is Melissa, and I have evidence here." Melissa was covered in injuries and in a confused state of mind when she was taken away by the police. In the courtroom, as she watched the surveillance footage of her transactions with a competitor projected on the screen, she suddenly let out a hysterical scream. I did it all. Back then, I forged the chat records to make Benjamin misunderstand Nancy. I deliberately acted pitiful in front of her to gain sympathy. I orchestrated her miscarriage." Her voice echoed through the courtroom, each word striking Benjamin's heart like a heavy hammer. He sat in the corner of the public gallery, his face as pale as paper, his nails digging so deeply into his palms that they drew blood, yet he remained completely unaware. In the end, Melissa was sentenced to 10 years in prison. On the day she entered prison, Benjamin stood under the plane tree outside the prison, waiting from dawn until dusk. Every scene here was filled with memories of their past, making it impossible for him to forget or let go. He finally understood that what he had lost was never just a lover, but the girl who once had her heart and eyes full of him, and the life he could have had, which he had personally buried. Regret washed over him like a tide. Yet he had long known that the most useless thing in this world is a belated realization. After achieving career success, Claude proposed taking Nancy to Iceland to see the Northern Lights. They set off on their journey soon after. In Iceland's night sky, the dazzling aurora flowed across the horizon, with luminous ribbons intertwining and transforming. Nancy tightened her thick down jacket and stood at the center of the frozen lake, her exhaled breath merging with the shimmering lights before her. "Are you cold?" Claude gently wrapped a cashmere scarf around her neck from behind, his fingertips carrying just the right warmth. Nancy shook her head, her gaze still fixed on the dancing aurora in the sky, unable to hold back her admiration. "So there really is such beautiful light, more beautiful than in your painting," Claude joked with her, his voice slightly carried away by the wind. "It's a different kind of beauty." She turned around with a smile, meeting his gentle gaze directly. "The painting is imagination. What's before our eyes is reality." "Thank you, Claude." Claude smiled, then suddenly took her hand and led her toward the small wooden cabin not far away. Neatly stacked firewood lay outside the log cabin, and the wind chime hanging on the lintel tinkled in the breeze, as if deliberately arranged. "Close your eyes," he whispered mysteriously. Nancy complied, her eyelashes trembling slightly in the cool air. When she opened her eyes again, the sight before her made her hold her breath. On the snow in front of the log cabin, a butterfly was outlined with fluorescent stones, its wing patterns identical to those in her painting breaking the cocoon from her art exhibition, and in the center of the butterfly, Claude was kneeling on one knee, holding a velvet box in his hands. The ring inside the box was unique, and the sapphire at its center was exceptionally dazzling. Nancy could feel her heart racing wildly. "This is something I designed myself." Claude spoke with a barely noticeable tension in his voice for the first time. I worked on it for a long time, just to give it to you." He lifted his head, his gentle gaze more captivating than the aurora borealis. "The first time I saw you in the gallery, you were staring at that damaged sketch, completely lost in thought, yet I couldn't take my eyes off you. Later, I watched you stay up late painting, saw you clumsily restoring ancient artworks, witnessed your strength and courage when facing public criticism. I knew then that I didn't want to just be your friend." He took a deep breath, his tone utterly sincere. "Nancy, I want to be the one who stands by your side to see all the wonders of this world, no matter how difficult the past has been, or how far the future stretches. I want to walk holding your hand. Will you give me this chance?" Nancy's tears fell without warning. She remembered the warm milk he silently handed her in the gallery, his unwavering stance when he shielded her from Benjamin, and his patient listening when she spoke of her past. His tenderness had already, quietly and imperceptibly, illuminated her once gloomy world. She reached out, her fingertips lightly brushing against the ring. The cool metal carried a reassuring strength. "I do." She heard her own voice trembling, yet it was incredibly clear, the moment she spoke. Claude, a look of disbelief lit up in his eyes. He carefully slipped the ring onto her ring finger, then stood up and pulled her tightly into his embrace. The aurora above them shifted into its most brilliant arc, as if unfurling a brand new starry sky for this couple who had weathered so many storms. Meanwhile, in a coastal city back home, Benjamin, who was on a business trip, stood by the seaside, clutching his phone. On the screen was a photo sent by his assistant. Under the northern lights in Iceland, Nancy was nestled in Claude's arms. The ring on her ring finger glimmered faintly, and her face showed a completely relaxed happiness he had never seen before. Benjamin felt as if he had fallen into an icy abyss. He hurled his phone violently into the sea, where it splashed and quickly sank into the dark depths. He pulled out that group photo from his chest. In the picture, Nancy was smiling with crescent-shaped eyes, nestled close to him. His heart ached as if hollowed out, gazing at the waves. He turned and left without looking back. That night when he returned home, Benjamin opened a bottle of whiskey. He took a big gulp. The spicy liquid burned his throat, yet it couldn't suppress the dull ache deep in his heart. He remembered telling her on the playground when they were young, "Nancy, I like you." Remembered staying by her bedside all night when she was sick. Remembered vowing to give her a wedding of the century. Those broken promises engulfed him like a tidal wave. Bottle after bottle emptied. He held that tattered photograph and sat alone in the empty house all night. Endless regret enveloped him. Yet nothing could be undone anymore. "Nancy." He called out that name alone, but no one could hear him anymore. Under the starry sky of Iceland, Nancy leaned against Claude's chest, watching the aurora gradually fade, a relieved smile curling at the corner of her lips. The scenery of the future awaited her and the one beside her to slowly paint together. Melissa learned in prison that Benjamin had completely given up on searching for Nancy. She suddenly let out a sharp laugh, muttering incomprehensible words over and over. "He is mine. Nancy took everything from me." When the prison guard found her, she was banging her head against the wall, her eyes vacant. Eventually, the evaluation concluded that she was mentally unstable, and she was transferred to a severe psychiatric hospital. She would spend the rest of her life accompanied by medication and restraints, even in her dreams reliving the day of the forced wedding. Meanwhile, the Brandon family's corporate crisis erupted completely 6 months later. Benjamin locked himself in the old mansion, grieving over Nancy's photo day after day, letting documents pile up without bothering to read them, under his increasingly lax management. The Brandon family conglomerate was on the verge of bankruptcy. Faced with his assistant's urgency, he simply said calmly, "Transfer 60% of my shares to Nancy. No need to inform me after the procedures are completed." The assistant was stunned, and he added, "Say it's compensation." When the share transfer agreement arrived in Paris, Nancy was in her studio sketching designs for the new collection. Claude handed her the document and watched as she turned to the final page. Nancy was slightly taken aback. This turned out to be Benjamin's property transfer deed. Benjamin's signature was so scribbled it was almost illegible, with a line of small characters written in pen beside it. "Nancy, this is all I can give you." Reading that line of fine print, the two fell into a long silence. Nancy closed the document and calmly said to Claude, "Contact the lawyer. Donate all these shares to the Women's Anti-Domestic Violence Public Welfare Fund." "Okay." Claude held her hand that was holding the pen, gently stroking the ring on her ring finger. Nancy looked up, determination in her eyes. "What's past is past. We need to look forward." Shortly after Benjamin voluntarily gifted the property, Nancy set up her own studio. Regarding this matter, Nancy always supported her from behind the scenes. The studio was located in an old building in Paris, with a courtyard full of tulips downstairs. Claude moved his curatorial office over, right next to her painting studio, although it was for the convenience of work, more often than not. He would quietly stand at the door of the studio, watching her lean over the drawing table to revise her designs. He loved seeing her focused expression and the soft rustling sound of her pen gliding across the paper. Once, Nancy worked late into the night and looked up to find him asleep on the nearby sofa. Whenever she saw him like this, she would smile knowingly, sneak over to steal a kiss, only to be caught in the act by him. Their sweetness is hidden in the little details of everyday life. Claude remembers her preferences. Nancy knows he has a slight obsession with cleanliness. They are the ones who know each other best. Once, during a studio celebration party, someone started teasing, "Mr. Claude, when are you going to marry designer Nancy and bring her home?" He smiled and wrapped his arm around her shoulder, the tenderness in his eyes almost overflowing. Regarding this matter, he hoped to wait until she was ready, not wanting to tie her down with marriage and hinder her career. Nancy laughed and playfully hit him, but her ears turned red as she turned away. In the evening, Claude hugged Nancy from behind as she was packing up her painting supplies, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Shall we go sketching tomorrow, for old time's sake?" "Sure." Nancy turned around to hug him back, her nose brushing against his shirt collar, catching the familiar scent. "But this time, I want you to be my model," Claude chuckled softly. The vibration of his heartbeat transmitting through their pressed-together bodies, warm and steady, and their future is beautiful because they have each other's company. 1 year later, Nancy and Claude held a small wedding in Europe. Nancy and Claude held their wedding at a rented estate. There was no extravagant archway, only a carpet laid by friends themselves. They didn't play the traditional wedding march. Instead, a guitarist played light folk songs by their side. There were no more than 20 invited guests, all close friends they had met in Europe over the past few years. Nancy wore a wedding dress of her own design, a simple satin gown embroidered with butterfly wings, with countless shimmering dots flowing along the hem as she moved. She walked down the aisle and, amidst the blessings of all, waited for her groom. When Claude walked toward her in his custom-tailored light grey suit, she suddenly remembered how he looked when she first saw him at the gallery. Back then, he was smiling just like this, gentle and radiant. Perhaps even then, this man had unexpectedly found his way into her heart. Nervous, Claude stood before her, his fingertips gently brushing the stray hairs at her temple. Nancy shook her head, yet felt her fingers tremble slightly as he bowed his head to place the ring on her finger. This ring was simpler than the sapphire engagement ring from Iceland. Yet it seemed to carry a more special meaning bestowed by him. When Claude's ring touched hers, she suddenly smiled. "I do." She heard her own voice, clear and firm, and her eyes were brighter than any light. Claude bent down to embrace her, his palm gently cradling the back of her neck as his kiss landed with tenderness and reverence. Scattered applause and laughter rose around them. Among the guests, someone wiped away tears and said, "How wonderful, we've finally waited for this day." Nancy leaned against Claude's chest, breathing in his familiar scent, and suddenly felt all the heart-wrenching pain of the past transform into this moment of perfect fulfillment. It turns out that after emerging from the shadows, the sunlight truly feels this warm. It turns out that meeting the right person can bring such happiness. The wedding photos were shared by friends on social media, and without any deliberate marketing, they were unexpectedly reposted by domestic media. The news headline read, "Chinese-American designer Nancy gets married overseas. Groom is a well-known curator." Benjamin saw the photo in the newspaper at the old house. He sat alone in the empty living room, a cigarette held between his fingers, his cheeks sunken from weight loss, his whole person exuding a faint aura of lifelessness. In the photo, Nancy wore a wedding dress, her brows and eyes relaxed, showing a ease he had never seen before. He stared at the ring for a long time, until the cigarette ash fell on his knee, jolting him back to reality. He stood up to get a glass of water from the living room, but a yellowed note fell out from the liquor cabinet. As he bent down to pick it up, he noticed it was written in Nancy's youthful handwriting, crooked yet earnest, "Benjamin, we'll be together forever and see all the sights in the world." Next to the handwriting, there were two little figures holding hands. Benjamin clutched the note, his knuckles turning white. As a sudden mist clouded his vision, he remembered that year when he was 18. Nancy had held up this note and smiled at him, her eyes curved like crescent moons. "When you marry me someday, you have to take me to Iceland to see the northern lights, to Provence to see the lavender fields, and to Antarctica to see the penguins." At that time, he smiled and pulled her into his arms, saying, "All right, I'll take you everywhere." But in the end, the one who watched the aurora with her wasn't him. The one who promised her a lifetime wasn't him, and the one who stood by her side to see all the world's scenery wasn't him either. The cigarette but burned his finger. Benjamin suddenly let go. The note fluttered to the ground, covering the photo on the coffee table. He looked at the empty room and realized clearly for the first time that some things, once missed, can never be recovered. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Nancy was leaning on Claude's shoulder, watching their friends set off fireworks on the lawn. The brilliant light danced in her eyes. Claude took her hand and asked softly, "Where do you want to go next? Anywhere is fine." She turned her head with a smile and kissed the corner of his lips. "As long as I'm with you." Fireworks burst in the night sky as they kissed endlessly in the passionate atmosphere. The shadows of the past had long since faded, and the scenery of the future awaited them to paint it together. The end.